In this video, we're going to tackle one of the most important aspects of trading systems research: data and how to get it. Having good data really underpins all the research that we'll do. But unfortunately, good data can be hard to come by, and often is quite time-consuming to wrangle into a format we can use in our research, not to mention store and access efficiently. As you might have guessed, Zorro actually takes care of a lot of the heavy lifting for us in regards to data management. The process for managing data with Zorro is actually pretty simple once you know how, but I know that it can be a frustrating endeavor for beginners when they're first starting out. By the end of this video, you'll be able to access data from a variety of sources with Zorro, including a local repository, various web services, and from your broker. You'll also be able to start building your own library of data for use with Zorro, and I'll even show you how you can easily export it to convenient CSV formats for use in other programs if you want to. Maybe you already have a data library in CSV format. You can also convert that to Zorro's format with some scripts that come bundled with the software. Let's get started. The first thing you need to know about historical market data is how Zorro uses it. Obviously, Zorro uses historical price data when you put it in test and train mode. But Zorro can also use data in live trading mode too. And that's because sometimes we need some historical price data at the outset when we start trading. For example, say our script uses a moving average of the last 100 closing prices. In order to begin trading immediately when we put Zorro into trade mode, we would need to calculate that moving average. Therefore, we would need those 100 prior closing prices. In this case, 100 is our look-back parameter that you might have seen in some of the code examples from this video series and in the Robot Wealth courses. Normally, we can download those 100 historical prices from our broker, but sometimes our broker won't supply data or won't supply enough to cover the look-back period. In that case, we can tell Zorro to load the look-back data from our historical data that we have on file, and we do that via the preload, which looks like this in Zorro code. When Zorro is in simulation mode, the historical data that's used in the simulation is set via the start date and end date parameters. Here's how we use those. So in this case, a simulation period covers the 1st of January 2017 to the 31st of December 2017. Also note that this preload flag has no effect in test and train mode, only when Zorro is trading. Now, if you don't have data to cover that simulation period, you can download it in a couple of different ways, which we'll get to shortly. Now, another really important aspect of data handling in Zorro is the time zone. When downloading data with Zorro, the software automatically converts the data's timestamps to UTC time, regardless of the data source's time zone. This is really nice and convenient because it allows us to use price data from different sources, and it means that we have a consistent baseline time zone that we can work from. Handling time zones can be a tedious affair, trust me, and this is another example of how Zorro abstracts the detail so that we can focus on developing trading strategies. So next we need to understand how Zorro stores data. Zorro stores historical data in the history folder of your Zorro installation. this folder here, unless of course you've set up another history folder via the Zorro.ini or ZorroFix.ini files. We first introduced these configuration files earlier in this video series, so if this is the first time you're seeing this, maybe go back and take a look at those earlier videos. But in short, you can see here that my history folder is actually a Dropbox folder, rather than Zorro's default history folder. But for now, let's take a look at the default. Assuming you've just installed Zorro and only have the data that comes with the installation, you'll see in the history folder here a bunch of files named after the Euro-US dollar exchange rate, with the / removed. The files also specify a year, and they have the .t6 extension. The T6 format is used to hold the open, high, low, and close prices of individual price bars, and optionally information about spread and volume. The T6 format is one of Zorro's proprietary formats, and it holds data in a binary format, which makes backtesting and simulation really fast. You can also see that the files are stored in this flat file structure rather than in a database. Again, this makes managing your data about as simple as it could possibly be. Now, typically the resolution of this T6 data is 1 minute, which means that minutely open, high, low, closed data is stored. But actually, these files can store bar information at any resolution, not just minutely. You just need to be careful that the bar period you use in your script is equal to or less than the resolution of your data. For example, if you have data at a daily resolution, it makes no sense to try to simulate the strategy with a bar period of 1 hour. Zorro also uses the file extension .t1. These T1 files contain much higher resolution data. Specifically, they contain the best bid-ask quoted prices of an asset and can be used to simulate short-term high-frequency strategies, and even to model variable spread, which I'm going to show you how to do in a future video. To use these T1 files, Zorro S is required. That's the commercial version of Zorro. You also need to set the history parameter as follows. Setting the history parameter like so will make sure that Zorro accesses T1 files in any simulation and training runs. It is worth noting that Zorro can set up price bars of any time period, from 1 minute to 1 day and beyond, from data stored in both formats. If you've got Zorro S, you can set up price bars down to a resolution of 1 millisecond. But of course that requires T1 data. Regardless of the bar period, you can make Zorro react on the smallest granularity available in your data. For example, with T6 data stored at a resolution of 1 minute, you can set up daily bars for your strategy logic and make Zorro react to intraday price changes every minute, for example by executing a stop loss or a take profit order. If using T1 data, you could make Zorro react on any change in the best bid-ask price quotes. Doing so would rarely make sense though, as that level of accuracy is usually overkill for a strategy that takes its trade entry cues from daily price bars. But to make Zorro react on the basis of the resolution of your data, set the ticks flag like so. But do note that this will greatly increase the runtime of your simulation. Setting the ticks flag while using T1 data also carries a very large memory overhead, and you'll find that you can only simulate 1 or 2 years at a time. Finally, futures and options traders will be pleased to know that Zorro also implements a data structure specific to these derivatives. These files have the extension .t8, and carry additional information like strike price, expiry, and type. So now that you know a little about how Zorro stores and manages data, you need to know how to access that data in a script. Well, once again, Zorro makes that really easy for us. When you select an asset from the drop-down menu on the Zorro interface, Zorro will automatically go looking for the corresponding T6 or T8 history files, unless you've specified T1 in your script and have Zorro S. Note that the only difference between the names of the instruments that appear in the drop-down menu and the names of the corresponding history files is that the history files have any special characters like the / removed. If Zorro can't find the history files corresponding to the selected asset, or it can't find history files that cover the simulation period, you'll get an error message in Zorro's output window. You can also use the asset function inside a Zorro script to select the history files of different assets. Like so. In fact, you'll need to use this function when you do any portfolio trading across more than a single instrument. There's a whole module devoted to portfolio trading with Zorro in the Robot Wealth Advanced course, so be sure to check that out when you're ready. Once Zorro knows which history files it needs for your simulation, it will automatically set up price bars corresponding to your bar period. You can then access the data inside your history files within the script. Most often, you'll want to access the price data contained in those files. But remember that they can also contain information like spread and volume. To access the price data, you can simply use Zorro's 5 price functions, which return the open, high, low, close, and mean prices corresponding to the current bar throughout your simulation. Here's how to use those 5 functions. By default, these functions return the most recent value of the price that you've specified. However, you can also use numerical offsets to specify data from the past. For example, price open 2 returns the open price from 2 bars in the past. And you can even set up time series structures using these functions. For example, this line sets up a time series of closing prices corresponding to the bar period selected in your script or with the slider on the Zorro interface. And the time series will have the same length as the look-back period. And it's also updated at every bar throughout the simulation. Again, there's a lot more detailed information on using these functions and these time series data structures in the Robot Wealth courses. Okay, so now you know a little about how Zorro stores and manages data and how it accesses that data during a simulation. So next I want to show you how to use Zorro to actually get data. And this is another great example of how Zorro is the ultimate productivity hack for independent traders, because we can actually download data from multiple different web-based sources, each of which has its own unique API requirements, using a single, unified interface via Zorro. I can't overstate how much time this can save. Rather than having to write a separate tool for accessing each provider's data, Zorro can do it all for us. But before we get to that, the simplest way to start building your own data library is to firstly download what's available through the Zorro website. So navigate to the Zorro download page, like so. Then scroll down to Historical Data Archives. You can download all the data here using these links if you want to, but the 4 one-minute data archives will be more than enough to get you started. That's these 4 links here. They contain the price history of the instruments used in the trading strategies included with Zorro, as well as a longer price history for the major currencies and a shorter price history for an additional 28 currency crosses. To get this data, just click on each download link to start the download process. And you can see that the data comes down in this zipped archive format. You may need an archiving tool to then extract the compressed data. I like using a program called WinRAR, but there are other open source tools too, like 7-zip. If you're on Windows 10, you don't need a third-party tool at all, as support for extracting zipped files is included natively in the operating system. Just right-click the archive that you've just downloaded and select Extract Files, then browse to your History folder and select it. And now if I navigate back to that folder, you can see that my price history contains a lot more data than it used to. Remember, as I mentioned previously, that you can also set up a central repository for your price history and point Zorro to it via the zorrofix.ini file. Now is a really good time to do that, and this means that you can have a central repository of data that is shared amongst different Zorro installations, which is really convenient given that Zorro updates come out regularly. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back to the video on the tour of the Zorro installation directory, which came earlier in this series, and check out the part on Zorro's initialization files. But just briefly, here's what my history folder parameter looks like. You can see that I use a Dropbox folder as my central history repository. Now, to make the data that we just downloaded accessible via Zorro's drop-down Assets menu on the interface, you'll need to add the names of those instruments that we just downloaded to your Assets Fix CSV file. Just go back and review the video on Zorro's assets lists. That's the previous video in this series, if you're unsure about how to do that. So the data from Zorro's website is a really good starting point, but there will come a time when you need to further extend your library, or simply update the data that you do have with recent price history. We could do that by writing a simple download script that leverages the functions that are built into Zorro for accessing internet data. But even better, the Zorro developers have kindly put together such a script for us, and even included a convenient dashboard for interacting with the script without doing any coding whatsoever. The script I'm referring to is called download.c, and it comes included with your Zorro installation. Let's open it up in a text editor and take a look. There's actually quite a lot going on in this script, and it is full of useful, convenient functionality. And it's totally free. So download.c is used to download T1 or T6 data from a bunch of different sources, including a broker that you can connect to via API, if they do in fact offer historical data, AlphaVantage, which is a web service offering free, clean historical data, and Stook, which is another web service offering free data for many global markets, including futures and currencies. Note that AlphaVantage requires an API key, which you can get from the AlphaVantage website and set up in your Zorro.ini or ZorroFix.ini files. And you can see that I've entered my AlphaVantage API key here. Now, if you select the download script in Zorro's interface and click Test, you'll see a simple control panel pops up. That's this thing here. Control panels provide a simple and convenient way to interact with a script without editing any code, which makes them a great way to control a trading algorithm while it is actually trading, without the need to continually stop and restart it. There's an entire unit devoted to control panels in the Robot Wealth Advanced course, so do check that out at some point. Control panels can be as complex as your imagination likes, but the one we see here is very simple and consists of only two types of buttons. Yellow buttons are fields where the user can provide input. In this case, we can specify an instrument and a time period for the data we wish to download. In the instrument field, we can also specify an asset list, one of those asset files that live in Zorro's history folder, in which case Zorro will download data for all the instruments in that list, which is obviously a super convenient feature. Say I wanted to download all of the assets in my assets fix CSV file. I would simply do that. The blue buttons in the control panel are toggle buttons, and they scroll through a list of predefined values with each click, like so. This first blue button controls the resolution of the data we wish to download. You can choose M1, which downloads 1-minute price data and stores it in separate files by year. This is the data that you'll most often use in your backtests. You can also choose Tick, which downloads individual price quotes, that is, the best bid and ask prices whenever they change. This is a much higher resolution data and takes a lot longer to download than M1 data. And it also results in much larger files. You'll need this data if you're doing short-term or high-frequency trading, and you also need Zorro S to use this feature. Finally, you can choose EOD, which stands for End of Day, and downloads data at a daily resolution and stores it in separate files by year. The next button controls the type of data to be downloaded. Specifying Ask Bid downloads regular bid-ask data that you use in most backtests. Trades stores the recent trade prices and volumes, but this feature is not supported by all brokers. Unadjusted downloads daily data that are not dividend and split adjusted, and these might be of interest to options traders. And finally, selecting Asset List updates the trading conditions in the specified asset list according to the broker selected in the account field here, and stores them in the assets.csv file in Zorro's log folder. Remember that not all parameters are supported by all brokers, in which case those unsupported parameters are pulled from the existing asset list. So selecting this option won't actually download any data. It will simply update your assets.csv file. And if you need a refresher on these asset list files, just go ahead and review the previous video. The third blue button here specifies the data source you wish to download data from. Selecting Broker tells Zorro to download data using the API of the broker selected in the broker selection of the Zorro interface. So in this case, I'm selecting FXCM's API. Selecting Stuk downloads historical data from the Stuk website, but only end-of-day data is currently available through Zorro. Selecting Alpha Vantage downloads historical data from the Alpha Vantage web service, but again, only end-of-day data is currently available. Remember that to use Alpha Vantage, you need to go to their website and get a free API key and enter it in the Zorro.ini or preferably the ZorroFix.ini file located in the Zorro directory. At the time I shot this video, Alpha Vantage was my preferred source of end-of-day data for equities. Finally, don't be concerned about overwriting your existing data. If a data file with the same asset for the same year as selected in the control panel already exists, Zorro will just append the new data to the end of the file. So let's go ahead now and click Download, and this will download data for 2018 for all of the assets in my Assets Fix CSV file from the FXCM website. You can see here that Zorro is attempting to log into the FXCM servers using my demo account credentials. And now I've started the download process. And because I'm downloading quite a large number of instruments here, this download process could take quite some time. Now, there are some other useful ways to access data with Zorro that aren't yet included in the download.c script. Specifically, Zorro implements the asset history function. In fact, the download script we just looked at makes heavy use of this function. You can see it being used here, for example. Now, using this function, in addition to a broker, Alpha Vantage, and Stuk, you can also download data from Google, Quandl, and Bittrex, the latter of which is a source of cryptocurrency data. Zorro S is required to access data with Quandl and Bittrex. Using this asset history function is beyond the scope of this beginner's video, but there are some examples in the advanced course, and we'll cover this in later videos too. But for now, the download script and the data available from the Zorro website should be more than enough to get you started. Now, lastly, I just want to briefly introduce you to converting data from Zorro's formats to CSV and from arbitrary CSV formats to Zorro. Again, the Zorro developers were kind enough to provide some scripts that accomplish these tasks in probably 90% of cases that you'll likely encounter. Right now, I'll briefly introduce you to those scripts, and in another video, I'll show you how to handle edge cases that aren't covered by these scripts. Sometimes we may want to export price data to a CSV file for use in another program. For example, maybe you like running certain types of analysis in R or Python, or just like a certain library written for those languages. In that case, a CSV file is a convenient way to share Zorro's data. There are other ways too, like the R bridge and the forthcoming Python bridge, but CSV files are very convenient. Firstly, to export a single history file's price data from Zorro to a CSV file, you can use the CSV from history.c file. Selecting this file and clicking Test will open up a file selection dialog, and you can select a single file for conversion to CSV. The file will be exported to Zorro's history folder and will be called export.csv. Here it is here, and if you look at the size of the file, you can see that it's growing as Zorro exports the data. If you want to convert multiple files using this method, be sure to rename export.csv between each file. Otherwise, it will be overwritten when you choose the next one. If you wanted to export a longer price history of an asset, use the csv export.c script instead. This one allows you to set the date range of the data you want inside the script itself. Let's open that file and take a look. Say I wanted all the data from the start of 2012 to the end of 2017. I just need to modify my start date and end date like so. You can also set the bar period of the exported data using the period slider directly on the Zorro interface. And you can also select the asset directly from the drop-down menu. Then you simply click Test, like so. This script saves the CSV file to Zorro's history folder, like in the previous example, but this time it names it after the asset that you selected. That's this file here, and again you can see it growing in size as the export process progresses. I'm just going to stop that prematurely and then open this file to show you what the exported data looks like. And you can see there that Zorro has exported hourly open, high, low and closed data. Remember, if I wanted data of a higher or lower resolution, I just adjust the bar period. Now the last script I want to show you is the CSV to history script. That's this guy here. This script converts data from some arbitrary CSV formats, like those you get from Quandl, Yahoo and HistData, which is another source of paid online data that was popular some time ago, and converts that data to Zorro's T6 format. To use this script, you'll need to do a little more script editing than with the others. For example, you'll need to provide the name of the CSV file to be converted. That's this parameter here, as well as the name of the file you want to convert it to, which is this parameter here. You'll also have to provide the string format of your data, which looks something like this. Already provided in this script are the formats for HistData, Yahoo, TradeStation and STK. And you simply need to uncomment the one you need. If you don't know what a comment is in a programming context, you will very soon once you dive into the fundamentals course. So don't worry too much about that just now. Also, if your data is in a different format to the ones provided here, you'll need to provide it yourself. Again, once you've worked through the fundamentals course, this will become more clear. Now, just on that, if you're new to programming, some of the scripts I've shown you might look a little scary. But to be honest, these data conversion scripts represent probably the most complex type of programming that you'll ever be exposed to with Light C. That's Zorro's scripting language. In reality, most of your scripts will be far simpler. The point is, please don't be at all put off if the scripts in this video look overwhelming. You will be fluent in no time at all. And of course myself and James, as well as the entire Robot Wealth community, is here to help. So in summary, here are the things I've shown you in relation to using, storing, and getting data with Zorro. Firstly, that Zorro uses historical data in testing and training mode, and under certain conditions in trading mode. Remember our preload flag. Also, that Zorro converts the timestamps of historical data to UTC time by default, and expects that its own history files contain data aligned to this time zone. Also, that Zorro stores data in its own T1, T6, and T8 formats. T1 is for tick resolution data, T6 is for 1 minute or higher resolution data, and T8 is for futures and options. Zorro accesses price data inside its history files using the 5 price functions: price open, price close, price low, price high, and price, the latter of which is just the mean price of a bar. I also showed you how to get data with Zorro from the Zorro website and via the download.c script. And I mentioned that Zorro can also get data from other sources via the asset history function. Finally, I also showed you that we can convert Zorro's data to CSV format for use elsewhere, and that we can convert arbitrary CSV data to a format Zorro can understand, using scripts that come bundled with Zorro. Some other things that are possible with Zorro, but are beyond the scope of this video, include converting data from a CSV file to the Zorro format that doesn't fit within one of the formats defined in CSV to history.c. You can also automatically scrape data from internet sources that Zorro doesn't yet communicate directly with via API. And you can also generate T8 data for options and futures. I'll be showing you how to do these more advanced tasks in future videos. And some tasks, such as web scraping, are already covered in detail in the advanced course. So that's it. You should now have a reasonably good understanding of how Zorro gets, stores, manages, and uses historical price data. There's quite a lot to it, but the power of Zorro is that it provides a simple, unified interface to many different data sources, both local and web-based. If you have any questions or need any help with managing your data with Zorro, be sure to get in touch via the Slack channel. That's all for now. See you in the community.